time, this is our time, we won't be denied. Feed the fire that is raging inside. This is no time, this is show time, we will fight till their wills are broken. This is game time and it's game time, let the madness fly. Show the strength that just can't be defied. Find the power to devour, let the beast inside now be broken.
Quite explicitly, the US and the EU are saying that they want these new trade agreements to form the blueprint, the template for all future trade deals. And that means they're rewriting the rules of the global economy, and that means for everybody.
Once signed, it will cement a key part of the US government's plan to create a new global bloc that will ensure the dominance of its largest companies. And to understand why, we need to go back to the 1950s.
See the USA in your Chevrolet. America's asking you to call. Drive your Chevrolet through the USA.
After the Second World War, the United States accounted for half of the world's economy. Its influence was unmatched by any country, and it was able to write the early rules of international trade to its advantage. The World Trade Organization was created in this context, and the US dictated rules that favored American business. But as economies like China and India joined the WTO, it became a more democratized arena, and the US found it harder to control its decision-making.
At the WTO, at its Doha rounds, India spoke up and Brazil spoke up, and the US lost control.
I think it's no use beating around the bush. This meeting has collapsed.
The US felt it needed a new strategy to maintain its global dominance. So in the classical American style, they went big. To bypass the WTO, they're creating the biggest international agreements that the world has ever seen. They're called the three big T's. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, or TTIP, and the Trade in Services Agreement, or TISA. And they're all being negotiated in secret right now.
We only found out when WikiLeaks was able to leak parts of them.
And what's interesting is when you look across all of these deals, whether it be TTIP, TPP or TISA, China is excluded, but also Brazil, Russia, India, South Africa, they're all excluded because those are the emerging economies.
What is not often understood is that these agreements are part of a geopolitical war. This is a new war which is taking place between the United States and China. The United States is very scared of the rise of China, so it has moved to militarily encircle it through what is called the pivot to Asia, and now it's moving on to doing that economically.
The basic idea which comes across from reading US strategy papers is the construction of a new grand enclosure. And to put inside this grand enclosure, the United States, 51 other countries, 1.6 billion people, and 2/3 of global GDP. To integrate Latin America away from Brazil and towards the United States, to integrate Southeast Asia away from China and towards the United States, and to integrate Western Europe, pulling it away from Eurasia as a whole and towards the Atlantic.
Of the three big T's, WikiLeaks has revealed 4 chapters of the TPP, which affects 12 countries in the Americas and Southeast Asia. We also obtained and released the core text of TISA, which affects 52 countries, including the EU. But nearly all of TTIP is still secret.
Nobody knows about what's being negotiated in our name. So you have these far-reaching deals which are going to completely change the face of our economies and our societies, and yet even elected parliamentarians know nothing about it.
The world's biggest corporations don't have the same problem. They have been receiving VIP access from day one and have had abundant influence in the negotiations.
People, the likes of you and I, are excluded. Governments, to a great extent, are excluded. Those who are included are the multinational corporations.
These agreements are basically corporate ownership agreements. The funny thing about free trade agreements, as we understand them, is they often have nothing to do with trade in the sense of the mutual lowering of tariffs. What they're about is enshrining an investor rights regime in the respective countries and ensuring that corporations can run wild in the respective economies with very, very little regulation or impingement by government or authorities.
These treaties will have huge, huge implications for literally almost every critical issue that an individual citizen or community would care about: health, education, the environment, privacy, access to medicines. I mean, the list could go on.
One of the most criticised aspects is a system called the Investor State Dispute Settlement, or ISDS. It's a secretive international tribunal that allows companies to sue states over virtually anything that they can claim affects their investment.
If a protest affects their profits, they can sue. If laws affect their profits, they can sue. If new regulations might impact what they want to do with their money, they can sue.
This is a new power which will be handed over to US corporations to sue the governments of Europe in a parallel judicial system which is available to them alone. So people have no access to it, domestic firms have no access to it, governments have no access to it. It's just there for foreign investors, in this case, US corporations.
Based on ISDS history, critics argue that European state sovereignty and democracy are at serious risk. Previous lawsuits include Swedish company Vattenfall suing the German state for $3.7 billion for phasing out nuclear energy. British American Tobacco sued Australia for passing a law limiting cigarette advertising. The French company Veolia sued Egypt for raising the minimum wage.
What is so scary about this is that corporations want to lock in their power. So they not only want increased power, but they want to make it impossible for sovereign governments to reverse the changes which are going to give them power. So for example, with TTIP, if it passes with ISDS in it, the privatization of the National Health Service, which is happening in the UK, can never be reversed.
What is democratic about an enormous imposition of power on countries whose citizens have no way of knowing what's going on, of debating it, or influencing their government in its decision? That's anti-democratic.
The history of these agreements shows that they're very difficult to change unless people can see what's in them. And that's why they're kept secret. Because when the contents are revealed, it generates an opposition.
In a few moments, I will sign the North American Free Trade Act into law. NAFTA will tear down trade barriers between our three nations. It will create the world's largest trade zone and create 200,000 jobs in this country by 1995 alone. This agreement exchanges membership rights for China in the WTO for economic opportunities for America in China, for American businesses and American workers.
The agreement we're announcing today includes several important improvements and achieves what I believe trade deals must do. It's a win-win for both our countries. This deal is a win for American workers, for our farmers and ranchers. It will increase exports of American agricultural products. So instead of having a race to the bottom for lower wages and worse working conditions and more abuse of our natural resources, this is a race to the top. It's not just good for our businesses, it's good for our workers.
WikiLeaks has had considerable success delaying the TPP and opening up the debate around it and the teaser by releasing the secret draft texts.
Pacific partnership that we're working on. It's the biggest trade deal that we're working on right now. Has to do with the Asia-Pacific region. And it reflects our values in ways that, frankly, some previous trade agreements did not. It's the highest standard, most progressive trade deal in history.
Greetings, citizens of the world. What is the TPP? The average person has never heard of it, and most of those who have couldn't tell you what it is. The TPP, or the Trans-Pacific Partnership, is a trade deal that has been negotiated in secret for years now. A lot of people are going to be affected by this, but for some reason the public is not allowed to see what's in it. Many of the lawmakers which are about to vote on this deal haven't even read it themselves. Those who have read it are forbidden to expose what the deal contains. Though the public doesn't have access to the full text of this deal, drafts of this deal have been leaked and make it obvious why this is being pushed through in such a covert way. You may have heard the probability that the TPP will cause the U.S. economy to lose jobs. This may be valid, but it's hardly the most dangerous part of the deal. The real danger lies in the way that this deal overthrows the sovereignty of nations. The TPP would create a system of shadowy trade tribunals which would allow companies to override and nullify laws in any country. These tribunals are extrajudicial. Their authority is above national justice systems. The arbitrators are unelected and completely unaccountable to the people. Under the TPP, if a country passes a law to protect its citizens, a multinational corporation which is affected by that law can take that country to these tribunals. It doesn't matter what people voted for. Remember SOPA. Under the TPP they wouldn't even have to pass a new law. Unpopular measures like this could be imposed through a ruling. Politicians wouldn't have to risk anything. The TPP encompasses the United States, Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore, and Vietnam. Don't live in one of the countries implicated in the TPP. Chances are they're cooking something up for you as well. The TPP is only one of several alphabet soup trade agreements currently in the works. If they get away with phase 1 of this power grab, you can rest assured that there will be more to come. This isn't about trade. This isn't about jobs. This is about power. Power that is being covertly shifted farther and farther away from the people. It isn't enough for the corporate ruling class to have the politicians in their pocket. Now they want the ability to bypass elections and constitutions completely. How does that make you feel? The politicians who are pushing this bill have names and addresses. Look them up. Give them a ring. Rattle their cages. There is a time and a place for politeness. This isn't one of them. If you're a resident of any of the countries involved in the TTP, now is the time to put pressure on the whacking haircuts presiding over your particular region. Let them know that you know what they are up to. Make it clear that you will hold them personally responsible if they don't back out. We are anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.